What if you could pull back the curtain on your own mind? Well, that's exactly what Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman does in his masterpiece, Thinking, Fast and Slow. He basically gives us the user manual for the human brain.
Think about it. You make thousands of choices every single day, and you probably feel like you're in the driver's seat, a rational person carefully weighing the options. But what if, most of the time, the one at the wheel is actually an impulsive automatic stranger who is really in control of your mind?
Kahneman says we should think of it like a drama, playing out right inside your mind, starring two very different characters. These two agents are the stars of the show, and the plot, well, the plot is the story of how they work together, and sometimes against each other, to shape every single thought, judgment, and choice you make. Okay, so first up, meet System 1. This is your gut instinct. It's fast, it's automatic, it's emotional. It's that part of you that just knows 2 + 2 = 4 without thinking, or can instantly detect hostility in someone's voice. And then you've got System 2. This is your conscious, reasoning self. It's slow, deliberate, and logical. It's the part of your brain you probably think of as you. You can think of System 1 as the impulsive autopilot and System 2 as the careful pilot, but believe me, their relationship is a lot more complicated than that.
You see, System 1 is pretty much the silent hero of our mental lives. It's constantly generating impressions, feelings, and intuitions with almost zero effort. It's an absolute master of pattern recognition, a skill we have to thank for our survival as a species, really, designed to make split-second decisions. Its power is incredible, and sometimes it can almost feel like a sixth sense.
Let me tell you this story about a fire commander. He and his team were in a house, hosing down what seemed like routine kitchen fire. Then all of a sudden he heard himself shout, "Let's get out of here." He had no idea why he said it, but almost immediately after they escaped, the floor collapsed. It was only later he realized the fire had been unusually quiet and his ears had felt unusually hot. His expert intuition, his System 1, recognized a deadly pattern that his conscious mind hadn't even begun to process. It saved everyone's life.
But here's the thing. System 1's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. It jumps to conclusions. Take a look at these two words. Bananas. Vomit. See? You couldn't help it. Your mind instantly created a story, a connection. The bananas made someone sick. It happened automatically, effortlessly. System 1 is a brilliant but sometimes reckless storyteller, and it will weave a narrative from any scraps of information it can find, whether they're true or not.
Okay, so now let's turn to our second character, System 2. This is the voice of reason. It's the part of you that you really identify with, your conscious self. It can follow rules, compare things, and make careful choices. It's the only thing in your head that can hit the brakes and override the impulsive suggestions from System 1. But, and this is a huge but, it is incredibly lazy.
Take a moment. Read this little logic puzzle. Is it valid? Your System 1, your gut, is probably screaming, yes. I mean, it feels right, it sounds plausible. But to really know for sure, you have to wake up that lazy supervisor, System 2. You have to actively force yourself to check the logic, to really search for any flaws.
The truth is, the argument is flawed. It's entirely possible that the flowers that fade quickly are, tulips and daisies, and that not a single rose is among them. The conclusion is plausible, sure, but it's not logically guaranteed. And most people get this wrong because their lazy System 2 just doesn't bother to check. It takes real energy to fight your intuition, and energy we're often just not willing to spend.
And what happens when System 2 gets tired? Well, it can get pretty scary, actually. This is a phenomenon called ego depletion. A really disturbing study of Israeli parole judges showed the consequences. This chart shows the percentage of parole requests approved throughout the day. See those spikes? Up to 65%? They happen right after the judges have had a meal break. As the day wears on and they get mentally tired, the approval rate plummets to almost zero right before their next break. A tired, hungry System 2 just defaults to the easiest, safest answer, no. Your entire future could literally depend on whether the judges had lunch.
So this constant interplay, this conflict between an impulsive System 1 and a lazy, energy-saving System 2, it creates predictable, systematic errors in our judgment. To save energy, our brain loves to use mental shortcuts, or what scientists call heuristics. And these shortcuts, well, they often lead us straight into cognitive biases, like latching on to the first piece of information we hear, or only seeing the evidence that confirms what we already believe.
One of the most powerful shortcuts is the availability heuristic. Basically, we judge how likely something is by how easily an example pops into our head. So after the news is filled with coverage of a plane crash, that vivid image is highly available to us.
We start to overestimate the risk of flying, even though statistically it's way safer than driving. What's recent and memorable just feels more probable than what's actually true.
And this is where our thinking gets truly counterintuitive. This diagram, it reveals the strange, irrational way we think about risk. This is the heart of Kahneman's Nobel-winning prospect theory. The key insight is something called loss aversion. Simply put, the pain of a loss feels about twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equal gain. And that one simple fact explains this whole weird pattern. When we have a high chance of a gain, we get cautious. We'd rather take the sure win. But when we're faced with a high chance of a loss, we suddenly become risk-seeking. We're willing to gamble big just to avoid that certain loss. It's a predictable pattern of irrationality, and it affects us all.
So, if our minds are this flawed, are we just doomed? Not at all. The goal isn't to silence System 1. I mean, we need its speed and intuition to get through the day. The secret is learning to recognize when its advice might be suspect and when it's time to call in the heavy artillery of System 2. It's about knowing when to trust your gut and when to slow down and really think it through. And that all starts with understanding who exactly is making your life's big decisions.
Kahneman introduces one last crucial distinction: the two selves. The experiencing self is the one that lives life moment by moment. It answers the question, does it hurt now? But the remembering self, that's the storyteller. It answers the question, so how was it on the whole? And here's the twist. It's the remembering self that makes all of our future decisions.
Imagine you're listening to a magnificent symphony for 40 minutes. You're just in a state of pure bliss. But in the final seconds, there's a horrible scratch on the record. Later, your remembering self declares that the bad ending ruined the whole experience. But it didn't, did it? The 40 minutes of bliss actually happened. Your experiencing self lived them. The problem is, our memory gives huge weight to the peak moments and the ending of an event, and that's what has the final say. Our choices are guided not by our actual experiences, but by our often flawed memories of them.
Look, understanding your mind's two systems isn't going to make you perfect, but it will make you wiser. It gives you the vocabulary to spot the mental traps that your own brain lays for you. It's the power to just pause when your gut screams and ask a simple question: is this real intuition, or is this just a bias talking? The next time you face a big decision, remember the reckless storyteller and the lazy supervisor in your head. Knowing they're there, that's the first step. Choosing to think slowly is the second, and that is how you begin to think better.